Et donc, je vous souhaite la bienvenue à la première table ronde. Et on a avec nous les conférenciers invités et Hélène qui va, la méchante, comme Laurent l'a dénommée, pour représenter, en fait, compte différents modèles d'immersion. Donc, the first, and I think we're going to try to go mostly in English, and maybe with some intervention in French. But it's going to be mostly in English and maybe in Catalan or a few other languages. And I first would like to have our presenter and panelists to present themselves each at a time to tell us who they are, where they're coming from, what languages they are working with.
Good morning. I apologize for not being a Francophone. I don't speak French, but I try to follow, and I feel it's a very good experience to be immersed in a language you don't understand, so you really feel what others feel. I'm coming from the United States, originally from Argentina, so my language is Spanish, and I also went to a immersion English, Spanish in the K-12 system in Latin America. I am now at DePaul University in Chicago, and I have been working with, and I'll tell you about that, a university that is based in Puerto Rico, but have campuses in the United States, continental United States.
Good morning. I'm Nina Pilke from Vaasa, Finland, and my skills in French are zero. But I think I understood quite a lot from the plenary, and especially the German examples, because my languages are Finnish, Swedish, German, and English. I'm professor in Swedish, and actually I'm a bit of outsider here, because I'm not the immersion researcher, actually. I work with languages for special purposes and terminology. But my colleagues work with immersion. I have been involved in their projects, so you will hear more in the afternoon.
Hello, everybody. My name is Xavier Vila, and I am the director of the Center for Research on Social Linguistics and Communication at the University of Barcelona, and I'm a member of the Department of Catalan Philology and General Linguistics. I've been doing research in language policy, especially in language and education policy for some years, and the languages I'm most familiar with are what we call medium-sized languages which are between, let's say, 500,000, 1 million speakers and 25 million speakers. My perspective is a very European-centered perspective, which means that I'm relatively familiar with languages such as, for instance, the situation in Finland, in Denmark, in places like this. So that's it.
Bonjour, je suis Hélène Kneur, je suis professeure ici à l'Institut des langues officielles et du bilinguisme à l'Université d'Ottawa. I've been involved in our French immersion studies program since it's started and even before that. So we work with French and English, but it's basically the idea is our students are Anglophone students taking some of their courses in their program in French and getting some language support in French as well. So that's been my area of involvement for the past number of years.
Voilà. Rebonjour, j'ai déjà été présenté, donc ça peut aller très vite. Donc je peux m'arrêter là, mais juste préciser que quand je travaille sur la question de l'immersion ou de l'enseignement plurilingue, c'est en tant que linguiste essentiellement, vous l'aurez sans doute compris. J'ai enseigné la langue il y a un certain nombre d'années, mais voilà, c'est pas en tant qu'enseignant de langue que j'aborde ces questions d'immersion à l'université. J'ai travaillé sur beaucoup de contextes dans différentes situations. En Suisse, évidemment, avec les langues officielles, allemand, italien, français. J'ai travaillé assez longtemps aussi sur des projets à la Vallée d'Ost en Italie, à Ostavalli en Italie, which is a bilingual region with French and Italian. So, je travaille assez régulièrement aussi. Moi, je suis binational, mon père est italien, Gaio è italiano, quindi lavoro in italiano spesso. Et puis, donc, c'est surtout ces langues-là, l'anglais assez régulièrement qui est présent dans toutes sortes de contextes différents. Et puis, nous avons pas mal dans mon institution de projets qui tournent autour de l'intercompréhension entre langue romane, qui est une des voies pour amener le plurilinguisme dans le travail universitaire aussi, et tout ce qui est langue romane et non romane, parce qu'il y a des projets aux États-Unis avec anglais, espagnol et français, est une façon aussi d'amener des projets intéressants pour travailler de manière plurilingue. Voilà.
Merci. Donc, ce qu'on va faire, c'est que je vais poser les questions aux panélistes et ils vont y répondre chacun à tour de rôle. Et par la suite, vous pourrez avoir une discussion avec les panélistes une fois qu'on sera passé à travers nos questions. And I've put the questions here on the slides in French as well as in English, so you can follow. And so what I would like you to start with is give a brief history and description of a program that your university is involved with and which languages are involved. So Sonia?
So, as I said before, my affiliations with DePaul University in Chicago, but I've been working with this university that is based in Puerto Rico, and the name of the university is Sistema Universitario Ana G. Méndez, SWAGM for short. It is the largest private not-for-profit university system in Puerto Rico, currently having over 40,000 students enrolled in programs and degrees from associate to doctorate degrees. It's accredited by the Middle States Commission of Higher Education since 1959, so it's been around quite a while. In 2003, SWAGM established its first dual language campus in Orlando, Florida. And I'll be talking a lot more about all the details about this university, the campuses that are dual language, partial immersion in the continental United States tomorrow. But just to give you a little brief background, it is a Spanish-English 50-50 model. So it's a dual language. At the moment, it's a one-way, mostly, Spanish native dominant speakers. Since 2003, it has expanded to another 4 campuses. So there are a total of 5 campuses, 3 in Florida, 1 in Tampa Bay, close to Orlando, Florida, 1 in Orlando, and another one close to Miami. And recently, in the past 5 years, they've opened up 2 more campuses, 1 in Maryland, close about 30 minutes away from Washington, D.C., and 1 in Dallas that opened 2 years ago. The majority of the students are Latino and Latin American origin, and as I said before, they are dominant in Spanish, learning English, even though all the curricular areas are in both Spanish and English. And the degrees that are offered are AAs, associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, and master's degrees, and all the courses are in Spanish and in English, but not at the same time. And I'll talk a little bit about that and the language boundaries that are used and the language distribution that are used.
I may now surprise most of you, but the fact is that my University of Vasa, does not have any immersion programs. And the same applies to Finland as country when we are talking about education after basic education. That's the situation now. So far, programs which fulfill the criteria for immersion program exist only on the levels of early childhood education and basic education. And now you may wonder why I'm here, if there aren't any programs in higher education. Well, instead of complete programs, we have both courses and something what I have decided to call paths, which are relevant in the Finnish context. The history of the course-bound immersion teaching started at the University of Vaasa in 1992. That is 5 years after immersion teaching was started on lower levels in the education system in Finland and in the city of Vaasa. The immersion courses at the university, they are language courses and restricted to Swedish language, the minority language. The main purpose of the courses following immersion methodology is that the students trust their ability to use the other national language, not only when writing, but also orally, and that they are motivated to learn more. These aspects are important because the discussion on Swedish as compulsory school subject, on bilingual services in the society, as well as on the bilingual status of the country, is getting more and more polarized in Finland. Another example of an immersion-based application at the University of Vaasa is the education program of immersion class teachers, which started in its current form in 2014. The program, parts of the program follow the immersion principles, but the overall coordination and ways of implementation still need to be developed before this can be called an immersion program. The aim with this program is to provide Finnish society with immersion teachers who have solid language skills in Swedish, expertise in immersion methodology, as well as in didactics and school pedagogy. So, thank you.
Okay, I was happy to hear that you would be surprised by the Finnish example, because perhaps you'll get even more surprised with what I'm going to say. If you go to Google, or even if you to Google a scholar, and you look for immersion, university, and Catalan, you'll find very, very few references, not only because very few research has been done, but also because the term immersion is right now a term which is very, very, very confusionary, to put it some way. I mean, in Catalonia, we started using the term immersion 30 years ago for primary and pre-primary courses, but the term adopted its own life and became widely used by journalists and politicians and everyday people. And what happened is that the term changed its meaning. Let me put it this way. At the beginning, immersion courses were Catalan language courses for non-Catalan speaking children, okay? Little by little, immersion became associated as, yes, immersion means courses in Catalan, okay? So it became as a sort of a synonym. And after some years, everybody would start saying, yes, immersion is teaching in Catalan and non-immersion is teaching in Spanish. Okay? Then politicians arrived. And when you've got a conflict with politicians and scientific terminology, you can imagine what happens. Those who were against using Catalan as the language of education said, we are fighting immersion. And those who were in favor of Catalan being used as a language of education said, we are in favor of immersion. Okay? So the term, in didactic terms, the term stopped meaning anything for most of the population. The thing is so fantastic that, for instance, there's a group, a political party, which is widely against immersion. They have publicly said that we want to annihilate immersion, okay? And at the same time, simultaneously, they say, we want a trilingual model for every single children, which should be taught in Spanish, in Catalan, and in English. This is fantastic. Because if you want to get rid of one immersion, if you've got 3 languages, you see that the term right now cannot be used to describe the pedagogical approach. So, having said that, If we look for an alternative way of describing the situation, do we have universities that use more than one language to teach the same students? Yes, all our universities use more than one language, 2 and increasingly 3 languages to teach all students, to the extent that in many cases it is almost impossible to follow a degree monolingually in one language, okay? Perhaps I exaggerated, it's not impossible. You can do that, but it is the probability is that you will have at least some of your courses in a second or a third language is very high. I've not calculated it, but it's really very high. Tomorrow I'm going to show you some figures about that. What's the purpose? Okay, we are a plurilingual society, but in comparison with the Canadian experience, where you have even spoken about les deux solitudes, we can never be alone. We are always with each other. We are packed there. I mean, Canada is a huge country. We are compressed in a very small area. And the thing is that our levels of bilingualism, of individual bilingualism, are very high. If you look at people born in Catalonia, 95% of the population claim that they is able to speak both Catalan and Castilian. And if you look at figures for the young generation, it's even more. It approaches 100%. Of course, those are declared data, and there are different levels, but this is our population. So we've got. We are not an independent country with independent laws. The laws depend, to a large extent, from those from Madrid, and that incorporates another element that has to be discussed. For instance, Catalan speakers do not have the right to be monolingual. Castilian speakers do have the constitutional right to be monolingual. So that makes things more and more complicated. But to end. Why do we have bilingual programs? Well, probably because it would be hard for us not to have bilingual programs.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's probably a lot more simple here. The University of Ottawa had a strategic plan called Vision 2010, which made university-level immersion a priority. So this is how the current régime d'immersion en français was born. There was, prior to that in the 80s, first experiment with immersion at the university level, and we'll talk about that later. But the main reason for Vision 2010 was to re-establish the linguistic balance between Anglophones and Francophones. The University of Ottawa has always been bilingual ever since its foundation, but the proportion of Anglophones and Francophones have fluctuated throughout history, and by the time of Vision 2010, it was like 70% Anglophones and maybe 30% Francophones. So the university wanted to get back to a more balanced balance, so hence le régime d'immersion en français. So we are a bilingual university, but le régime d'immersion en français, as its name implies, is for Anglophone students who have been through French as second language education in primary and secondary schools and who want to continue some of their post-secondary education in French. So it's not all their courses in French, it's a certain number, which they can determine. And the idea was to allow them to continue their education in French. And that's about it, I guess. Okay.
Laurent, je ne sais pas si, étant donné que toi, tu as dit que ton université n'avait pas de programme d'immersion, mais que tu fais des recherches sur l'immersion, maybe you want to mention what you are working on and the languages and the programs that you've looked at.
Le terme immersion est peu utilisé à l'université en Suisse, mais c'est le cas visiblement dans plusieurs pays européens. Donc on s'intéresse we have bilingual teaching and working environments in the university. You can use English, national languages, but you don't have the model of immersions as an explicit way to teach, to organize your faculty, for example. So, il n'y a pas vraiment si vous cherchez immersion à l'université en Suisse, c'est peut-être un peu comme en Catalogne, on trouve rien. En revanche, il y a des environnements plurilingues variables. Alors, il y a peut-être deux cas de figure à mentionner. Il y a les universités qui ont une tradition ou multilingue parce qu'elles sont dans une région officially bilingual region or city. J'ai mentionné cette université dans le canton de Berne bilingue, bielbienne. Vous avez l'université de Fribourg qui a une politique ou trilingue même avec une ouverture sur l'anglais. L'Università della Svizzera Italiana, qui est une petite université dans le canton monolingue du Tessin, avec l'italien comme langue. Mais cette université fonctionne aussi en 3 langues, italien, anglais, de l'allemand dans certains cours, parfois même du français. Donc, mais là, c'est des situations soit minoritaires, soit où la région est bilingue ou multilingue. Et vous avez des programmes dans plusieurs langues. Mais en général, dans ces universités-là, vous avez plutôt des monolinguismes en parallèle. C'est-à-dire qu'à Fribourg, vous pouvez choisir de faire le droit soit en allemand, soit en français. Parfois, vous pouvez éventuellement avoir un cours bilingue, mais c'est assez rare. Moi, j'ai demandé à une étudiante, j'ai pas mal d'étudiants, de doctorants, etc., d'aller essayer de trouver un cours vraiment bilingue à l'université de Fribourg. C'est pas facile, donc où vraiment les 2 langues sont utilisées. Il y a ces cas, comme celui que je vous ai montré à Bielbienne, qui sont assez exceptionnels. Pour les autres universités, comme Genève, Zurich, les universités dans des cantons monolingues, il y a quand même une diversité de langues, mais alors, il y a des langues nationales, là où il y a une raison comme le droit, par exemple, ou des programmes particuliers où on demande de travailler dans plusieurs langues, mais c'est assez périphérique. Ou alors, il y a cette fameuse internationalisation, et c'est plutôt bilingue. Et quand on vous dit on a un programme bilingue, ça veut dire qu'on a de plus en plus d'anglais. Hein, c'est ça que ça veut dire pour beaucoup de programmes. Donc, ouais.
5 years ago, on the 5th anniversary of the immersion, we had the Aline Goar-Radenkovic, who came here from the Université de Fribourg, and she talked about which is dead by now, the program, the bilingual program they had at their university, which was called Bilingue Plus, which was working with French and German. But as she said, it's not functioning anymore. Anyway, so maybe we can move forward into the questions, and maybe not everybody will have to answer this question if it doesn't apply to your situation, which is talking about the models, but some of the particulars of the models in your case. So I don't know who wants to start. Do you want?
I will start. I omitted to say that after November 9th, we have a bit of a problem in the United States. And so, particularly related to languages, because the languages in the United States are related to not always immigrants. Puerto Ricans are not immigrants, Native Americans are not immigrants. But the population for this university, the SWACA University, tends to have that type of population in mind, since they're mostly from Latin America, students from Latin America, a few from Spain, and increasingly, I'll share some of the demographics tomorrow, increasingly from other language groups as well. So I will also talk about tomorrow how Spanish is now, Instituto Cervantes put forth a research study that showed that there are more Spanish speakers in the United States now than in Spain. So that's an interesting, we have about 52 million Latinos in the United States. Of course, not all of them speak Spanish, and we have lots of non-Latinos who speak Spanish in the United States. So Spanish is an important language in the U.S. In terms of the Swaham University and the 5 campuses in the continental U.S., they offer 39 academic degree programs, including the biggest program, not surprisingly, is nursing. So we know that there's a huge need for nurses. The health field is a very, very popular field in the last 5-10 years, and there's an enormous shortage of nurses and health professionals. And of course, health professionals, in terms of nurses, there's an enormous need for bilingual, particularly Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese. There's criminology, business, accountancy, education, marketing, pharmacy, hospitality, so a variety of different degree programs. And as I said before, the bachelor's, associate level, and master's. It is a balanced language approach in English and Spanish, and there's a strict separation of the two languages. So the language boundaries are are followed. The way that the program is designed is that 1 week the students mostly go in the evening. So this is a university that is mostly geared towards adult learners, ages 23 and above. And so they have an accelerated program, and the way that the language is distributed is by week. So students go to classes for 4 hours a week. And so 1 week, the alternation is by week between Spanish and English. And there is a pretty strict separation of the two languages for the instructors, which I was curious to ask about our plenary speaker this morning. In regards to the different models of separation of the two languages, is it just the instructor, or is it both the instructor and the students? In this case, in this university, the separation is strictly implemented for the instructor, but the students are certainly able to use the repertoire of the two languages at all times. The type of theoretical framework is not, it sort of follows a content-based teaching, but it's actually called a discipline-based model, because the majority of the focus, it is academic, but it is on disciplines, so a professional sort of focus on developing professionals. As I said before, it's a balanced immersion 50-50 model. All the courses are taught in both languages. All the faculty, staff, and administration are bilingual and biliterate. All support and academic services are provided both in English and Spanish. And all students are required to take 4 Spanish language classes and 4 English language courses. And so that's a little tricky to do, particularly because a lot of the students tend to have needs for financial aid. And so I don't know if that's the same way it is here in Canada, but financial aid is according to credit hours. So if you go over the credit hours, then students are not able to get all of the financial aid that they need. All content courses incorporate language objectives, and I'll talk more about that tomorrow, as part of the student assessment. So all the content or discipline courses have a 70% content assessment that is tested and graded, and 30% of the course is graded for language, 50% for English, 15% for Spanish. The dual language model follows the content language integrated learning theoretical, but it's sort of modified for a discipline-based type of framework. And the faculty have intensive training on constructivist instructional approaches, so that it's not lecture-based, because we know in language particularly that's not a very effective way to develop a second language. And I'll talk more as we discuss and if you have questions.
Do you want to?
I can tell something about the language course. It is a course in Swedish, and it's given by the Language Center, which is the unit at the university where language instruction is given to students for all 4 academic fields. And currently, there's only one teacher who has immersion courses, and she is a language teacher who has her research background in immersion research. The course design is theme-based. Both case and field study are used in authentic environment, in the bilingual environment in Vaasa. The starting point lies in language learning and language teaching framed by the language and communication skills required in the curricula for the degrees and programs at the university. In practice, the design of the course has from the beginning been subject and work-life oriented, mostly because University of Vaasa has its background in a business school. And as it now a real integration of content and language is still missing, because the course is a language course giving language points. And 10% of the course is bilingual and the rest is in Swedish. And the education program of the immersion class teachers, it's a joint effort of 2 universities. And this is a new and very rare kind of cooperation between units with different languages. The Swedish-speaking university is responsible for the pedagogical studies and including the teacher training periods then. And our university, the Finnish-speaking unit, runs the language studies and immersion studies. And the planning and the implementation, this has required quite a big efforts. For example, different kind of legal issues were faced and needed solutions. So therefore, the Swedish language courses and the immersion courses and pedagogical courses, they still function as mainly separated parts in the program. But the development, from the point of immersion, it would be a very natural development to integrate the 3 parts by modifying the aims, contents and requirements for the credit units.
I feel a little bit like making a spoiler to myself because tomorrow I'm supposed to speak about the model. But okay, I'll give you some hints of the model. Perhaps the most important thing to keep in mind is that in Catalonia we are dead afraid of separating communities. In fact, we don't use the term community. I only use this term when I speak in English. Neither in Catalan or in Spanish, it makes no sense. We don't have the term. And it is quite interesting. And when I'm teaching my social linguistic courses, I explain my students that those weird people in North America organize themselves into communities, and they look at me and saying, "Well, that sounds strange. Tell us more about that, because we don't organize ourselves in different communities with different schools, different institutions." Our universities look quite a lot to this class here. Students, everybody is more or less expected to be at least receptively competent in the 2 languages, okay? Which means that, and everybody is, at least in theory, allowed to use whatever language he or she wants to use. That means that if I, as the lecturer, decide to give my course in Catalan, you are free, because you are a student, you're free to come here, and you are expected to follow my instruction, and you know that you can answer your exams in Catalan or in Castilian, in Spanish, okay? To a certain extent, that makes that our model is what Dr. Gallo would define as a model B, and quite often model 3A and even 3B. More questions. we are focusing on the language used by the instructor, by the lecturer, but in fact what goes on the classes depends very much on the didactic approach. In magistral courses, what happens is that the guy giving the lecture uses one language, and you've got both languages being used between students saying, what did he say? And you may have people writing in one language or in another language. I mean, if you look at the notes, the students' notes, you'll see that some of them take the notes in the other language. Even though, since most of them are proficient bilinguals, they tend to accommodate the lecturer. There are other elements that define the linguistic model. The materials used. Many of the written materials or the videos or the whatever material you use for your courses some are in Catalan, but the higher you go, the less material you have in Catalan, of course. Many are in Castilian, especially for some subjects. Law, for instance, which is a very nationalistic discipline, in the sense that it is strongly connected to the nation state. If you've got a bilingual nation state, you need to have bilingual lawyers. When you've got a monolingual nation state, which is the case in Spain, then lawyers focus only on the nation state language. So if you look at the language used at the faculties of law, until 2 years ago, Spanish would be the predominant language of teaching, oral teaching, and most of the written material is in Spanish. So that depends very much also on the discipline. But I insist, a very important amount of decision lies on the lecturer, who decides the language that he or she is using. And, okay, more tomorrow.
Suspense. At the University of Ottawa, the first experiment with immersion at the university level was done in the 1980s, and it was on a very, very small scale. So the way things work here at this university is that it is bilingual in that most programs are offered in both languages. So that's our context, and within that context, the first experimentation was done with what's called a sheltered model. One of the most written about experiment was with a first-year introductory course in psychology. There was about 12 sections of that course in French, and so 11 sections were for Francophone students, and 1 section was for Anglophone students taking the same course in French. Curriculum was the same, evaluation was the same, exams were the same, textbooks were the same for all 12 sections, but 1 was only for the Anglophone students. And the teacher teaching that particular section had training and interest in languages, so it was like best of both worlds. And some time of that class time was devoted to specifically language. That was the original model, and it didn't last forever. Yeah. And then when we moved to the régime d'immersion en français, the idea was that the students, the Anglophone students, in whatever program they are, as long as there is the same program in the other language, they can take some of their courses, their discipline courses in which they're specializing, in French. So they'll take the same course that they would take in English with an English prof and Anglophone students, but they would take it in French with French prof and Francophone students. So you would have this big lecture hall with 200 students and 20, 25 Anglophone students lost in the vast sea of Francophones. This is now offered in all 6 faculties, over 70 programs, Mark, if I'm not mistaken?
86.
Okay. So it's become a very big thing. And what makes this program unique in Canada, if not bigger, is the fact that students have access to language support classes. that are only for the Anglophone students. And there are 3 levels of these courses. The first level is receptive skills, the second level is productive skills, and the third level is like for more advanced classes. And the main specific element of these language support classes is that everything revolves on the discipline course content. There's no French as a second language textbook. All the material comes from the discipline course. And everything is done with the idea of improving language skills, so increasing vocabulary, reading strategies to be able to read and understand complex scientific texts, etc. And so we've gone from a sheltered model to an adjunct model with a language support class associated to the discipline class. So, and this is not a program, it's a service offered in over 80 programs. Okay.
Laurent, est-ce que tu veux rajouter quelques éléments avec ton expérience?
Pas trop, parce que comme je l'ai dit, on n'a pas vraiment de programme d'immersion en tant que tel, disons en Suisse. Mais ce que je pourrais rajouter, c'est que effectivement, il y a des environnements de travail multilingues dans les universités qui sont plus ou moins perceptibles. Après, ce qui nous intéresse, c'est d'aller voir des lieux précis où le plurilinguisme est une réalité. Alors parfois, même s'il n'y a pas une étiquette immersion, bilinguisme, quand on entre des fois dans une classe, il y a des modalités de travail qui peuvent être plurilingues. C'est le cas, on a suivi des laboratoires, par exemple, à l'école polytechnique fédérale de Lausanne, qui est une école très connue. Les bachelor's program are in French, but the masters are mainly in English. And in some master programs, in some bachelor's programs, they could use English too. So it is the institutional policy. But if you go into the classroom, you could be surprised because you have a lot of languages to be used for different purposes. Par exemple, vous avez justement avec les étudiants de mobilité, vous avez des étudiants chinois, etc., brésiliens, des fois des étudiants qui peuvent travailler with Portuguese or Spanish, could be a language of negotiation, of working between among some students. So, quand vous allez dans les laboratoires, ça peut être beaucoup plus diversifié que ce qui est affiché ou ce qui est supposé. Alors nous, c'est ce qui nous intéresse de voir aussi au quotidien comment les langues se mettent en route, indépendamment finalement des étiquettes qui sont proposées. Ça, c'est une chose. Et la deuxième chose, c'est de voir que à côté du mainstream ou des études dans les différentes facultés, de plus en plus d'universités mettent en place des services linguistiques, des centres de langue. Nous, on a à Genève une maison des langues. Et ce n'est pas juste l'enseignement des langues, c'est justement pour prendre acte de cette diversité linguistique qui est de plus en plus importante dans les différents programmes, de se dire quels sont les besoins, les questions qui peuvent se poser dans les différents programmes en matière de langue. Et par exemple, il y a beaucoup de questions qui se posent maintenant pour la mobilité in, mobilité out. Les gens qui viennent à Genève, with different languages, c'est quoi la place du français, c'est quoi le rôle de l'anglais et d'autres langues. Pour les étudiants de Genève qui partent à l'extérieur, comment les préparer, comment valoriser ce qui revient, etc. Donc il y a toutes les marges du plurilinguisme qui sont de plus en plus organisées en termes de services linguistiques. Voilà, on observe ce genre de choses, mais je m'arrête là.
D'accord, merci. Et maybe for some of you, you may want to discuss the assessment procedures, whether it's at the admission or at the exit of your programs. Do you have any requirements, minimum notes, maximum, certification? Is there something related to assessment? Donc les modèles d'évaluation, soit à l'entrée, soit à la sortie au moment de la certification.
At the university, they have, when the students are admitted, they take a diagnostic test in English and in Spanish. Even though the majority of the students are Spanish native speakers, there's, of course, variation in their academic and sophistication of the Spanish language. So they do take a diagnostic test in Spanish as well. And this is to determine the language proficiency level, also in Spanish, because there's an increasing number of students that are Portuguese speakers, a few French speakers from African descent. So they're expanding the student population beyond the Spanish speakers, and the placement test for English as well. Also, this diagnostic test provides the information for the levels of support that are needed, and I'll talk about more tomorrow. We're all giving a preview of tomorrow, so you have to come back to get the whole story. There is no minimum threshold for English proficiency, which some of us, and I've been working with this university, and my role is to be an external evaluator and support. And so really, there are students who are accepted into the program at zero, my level in French. And so it's a little bit difficult to get them up to par and get a degree in English at the university. Undergraduate students take a test that's called AccuPlacer. I don't know if you're familiar with that exam. While graduate students take a proprietary test that the university developed. Students' language progress evaluation consists of a midpoint and a capstone assessment project that is embedded in a specifically identified course at the midpoint of the bachelor's, associate, or master's, and it's usually in one of the discipline courses. And then there is a capstone assessment project that is also embedded in a course that's identified in their degree program. Students work on the completion of a comprehensive project in which discipline, context, and dual language professional competencies are assessed. At the end of the midpoint and capstone courses, the project is submitted to a panel of 3 faculty experts in the field, in the discipline, who evaluate and then rate the project using performance rubrics, mostly for writing, and there is a component of speaking as well. And then a statistical analysis report is disseminated to each of the campus's academic directors for further support or to talk to the students about how they can move forward if they're not progressing adequately.
And for the language course, our students, they apply by writing a motivational letter in Swedish, their L2. And the evaluation is constant during the course. The Immersion Teacher program has entrance tests in 3 phases, actually. First, applicants, they participate in a writing test, and 100 candidates proceed to interviews with 2 parts. The Finnish-speaking university is responsible for the interview, which assesses the students' skills in Swedish, and the Swedish-speaking university evaluates their suitability for teaching career. This has been successful because we have very motivated students who have the basic skills needed in the studies and the right attitude needed in the future job. The amount of exams which the students take in big auditoriums has been reduced, and other forms like learning diaries are used instead. And 2 important phases in the examinations are the theses on BA and MA levels. The first is about 30 pages, and this is written in the 3rd study year. And the second is around 70 pages and written in the 5th, the last study year. And the students, they choose themes which are related to teaching and bi- and multilingualism, not necessarily in classrooms. One example of this is a thesis written about bilingual writing lessons this spring.
Thank you.
All students who finish their compulsory education in Spain are awarded the recognition of the level of Spanish language. And those students who finish their studies in Catalonia receive the equivalent a C1 in the European Common Framework, which means that for Catalan students, there is no sort of linguistic requirement to know Catalan or Spanish, because they have that even before they enter university. Apart from that, there's to enter the university in the whole of Spain, you have to pass an exam which is called a selectivity, which virtually, well, more than 90% of the students pass that exam. It includes linguistic tests, and so that's basically the evaluation that is done before entering the university. Universities do not have their own exams. Okay, that means that Catalan students arrive with a high proficiency in both languages to Catalan universities. What happens with non-Catalan Spanish students? I mean, people from other autonomous communities in Spain. In fact, they are allowed to come without proving their competence in Catalan. Okay, I mean, legally they are allowed to enroll, and legally there can be no requirement of Catalan, because that would break the equality of rights of Spanish citizens according to the Spanish law. That means that if you want to go to a university where most of the teaching is done in Catalan, if someone asks you to have a level of Catalan, it goes against your rights to be monolingual, Castilian speaker. I know it sounds contradictory, but that's the law. And once you've got the law, who needs exams? The fact is that 20 years ago, the Spanish government had a brilliant idea. They said that since there's not much mobility between different regions in Spain, so, I mean, students go to a university which is not far away from the area, but they wanted to increase mobility, especially towards areas with other official languages. So they created a sort of an Erasmus program for Spanish students. So if you apply to go to a university which is not placed in your region, you are paid to go there. Okay, you got a small amount of extra money to go there. At that moment, many people said this is done to reduce the presence of the languages other than Spanish at universities. Well, the actual effect of that program is very, very low, and not many people move from one university, from one region to another one, because of fares. I mean, especially in Catalonia, the students pay more fares than in other Spanish areas, and also because probably the difference in quality is not that huge at the level of degree. Master's is a totally different issue. So the impact of mobility, mobility, is not that huge. So you've got a guy from Salamanca lost in a sea of Catalan students, so you don't realize he is there. Sometimes you may have a problem. He may raise his hand and say, "Excuse me, I come from Salamanca and I don't understand your course in Catalan." I'll talk about how to solve those wonderful problems tomorrow evening. And apart from that, there's the levels, the requirements, linguistic requirements for foreign students. We've got Erasmus students and an increasing number of people coming from all over the world for international masters. I'll also talk about that tomorrow, but to make it simple, until recently there was no, but that was not only in Spain, it was all over Europe. There were no clear linguistic requirements about what languages students should know to move from one university to another one. I think it was 2 years ago that the European Commission started saying, okay, you should tell us the official linguistic requirements. And then I remember the situation at my university. We had a meeting at the Language Policy Commission, And our professor started saying, yes, the requirements should be. Guess what sort of requirements our lecturers proposed for foreign students who would come to our courses? What would our lecturers ask for?
To study in English.
No, a level of English.
English.
Yes, they said, all students should have a B2 level of English. What for? I mean, for a second, just try to think about a researcher who spends 24 hours per day thinking that English is the language of international communication. Then he goes and gives his courses in Catalan, but that's a trivial issue. But he keeps thinking that English. And then when they were asked, what are the linguistic requirements? There was this general opinion. Yes, foreign students coming to my Catalan language courses should be able to speak English. Well, the Commission, the Language Policy Commission, had to make a sort of a pedagogical task to let lecturers understand that the requirements to attend their courses were probably different. And in the end, there's a sort of a variable architecture of requirements has been created. If you may, I mean, if you have, let me remember, to be accepted in first place to a course at at my university, you should have either B1 level in Spanish or A1 in Catalan, or B1 in Catalan or A1 in Spanish, but the A1 can be acquired while you are at the university, okay? So there's this flexibility in levels. But that is not applied to Spanish students. So a Norwegian should have an A1 Catalan, but a guy from Salamanca, no. Politics.
I think the situation here is a lot more boring. So again, I'll speak about this university because unlike, I guess, well, we don't have the same, like, which government does what, but universities have their own requirements. Here, in order to be admitted in the French Immersion Studies program, students have to pass a test, so an admission test, and they have to get a B1 level in order to be accepted within the program. Now, what happens is that if they are not quite there, they are advised to take regular French as a second language courses on top of the ones that they want to take in French, but it's advised. So they're tested when they apply. They are tested during the program because they're tested at two levels. They're tested in their discipline course in French, on the discipline, like on the content, and they're tested for their language support class if they take one. Those classes are credit courses, so there are exams, and so the students are tested there too, with the added difficulty of separating language from content. In the language support class, like the teachers have to make sure that they test the language and not what the students learn in the language in the discipline course. I should also mention, just like you did, that for the discipline course at the university level, all students have a choice to write their exams in French or in English, except in French language or English language courses. So they have that option. And to get the immersion certification for their program, they must pass our second language proficiency test before they finish their program. And this test has 5 components. They're listening, speaking, writing, reading, and grammar. There are 4 levels, and the students are required to have a level 2 in each of the 5 components. And then, so they receive an explicit certification to recognize that they took the Immersion Studies program.
Laurent, est-ce que tu veux rajouter quelque chose?
Ah,
Tu n'es pas obligé. Hein.
Oui, mais je vais ajouter quand même. Juste deux choses pour réagir. En Suisse, dans la plupart des universités, il y a aussi, il n'y a pas de programme d'immersion, on l'a dit en tant que tel, mais pour quelqu'un qui veut étudier dans une université suisse, you have to pass a language exam in German for Zurich, in French for Geneva, for example. And usually you have to be tested at B2 level for some universities, even C1 for given universities. Donc ça, c'est pour les gens qui font des études régulières en Suisse dans la langue, in the main institutional language. And for Swiss people, they don't have to pass exams. So if you are not a Francophone, as a Swiss citizen, you can get enrolled in the Swiss university. It could be a problem for some students in Geneva. So it's the same for you. Mais ça, c'est une question. Un problème qu'on a aujourd'hui, c'est qu'il y a plusieurs programmes internationaux bilingues. You have some programs in English being taught in Geneva and Zurich and so on. But you don't have any testing for those programs. For English as a second language, there are no explicit rules. So, vous pouvez entrer dans un programme bilingue, on ne va pas tester l'anglais. It's not the case for the students, it's not the case for the teachers. Il y a pas mal d'étudiants qui se plaignent que les enseignants enseignent mal en anglais ou en français. Les enseignants, il n'y a pas de contrôle. Il y a des attentes, mais c'est des attentes un peu implicites. Il n'y a pas de contrôle très précis. Une deuxième chose, c'est sur la question de la sortie du programme. Une question qu'on a souvent, c'est est-ce qu'on peut... is it useful to value the language, skills of the students? Est-ce que c'est bien d'intégrer des crédits, par exemple? Is it a good idea to integrate credits for language, for example? Il y a plusieurs propositions. C'est assez difficile d'intégrer les crédits in the core curriculum for some faculties. Maybe you could study some languages. You can have a certificate, but it's not integrated into the degree, the core curriculum. Ça, c'est une question qui est souvent posée. Et alors, la question qui se pose, c'est une question, je dirais, théorique. Parce qu'on parle beaucoup de soft skills. You have languages, différentes compétences qui sont appelées soft skills. Et on a une discussion en Suisse pour savoir si justement, is multilingualism a soft skill or a hard skill? Et puis la question, c'est si vous considérez les langues as a hard skill, maybe you have to give more credits for multilingualism. Ça, c'est une question, je dirais, stratégique et à la fois théorique.
Bon, vu que le temps est en train de passer, je vais éliminer la quatrième question pour vous donner le temps de poser des questions aux panélistes si vous le désirez. Et comme de toute façon, les panélistes vont nous reparler aujourd'hui ou demain, then you'll have either time to talk about the success and challenges during your own presentation. And now I'm just opening the conversation for everybody. If you're, oui.
I just want to verify, first of all, Hélène, here at the University of Ottawa, if an Anglophone student wants to take a French immersion program, the student has to have a minimum B1 level in French to be admitted, and that student will be integrated into a classroom with Francophones. I'm surprised that the entry-level requirement is as low as it is. My experience is that B1 does not equip a student necessarily with an ease in communicating or full comprehension or mastering different time frames in the language. What's your experience?
You're absolutely right. That's absolutely the case. It is the level that is required. It is not a level that is sufficient for the students to stay in the program and to successfully graduate. like we accept them at B1, but we have figures now that show that the higher their level in French at admission, the greater their chances of success. Yeah. But the admission level is B1.
I think I could just say, but we have the support courses, the adjunct language course, for the student to help them through comprehension.
But they're not compulsory.
No, they're not compulsory. D'autres questions pour... Oui?
Oui, Laurent, en fait, c'est par rapport à ce que vous avez dit, les soft skills et hard skills. On n'a jamais entendu parler de ça. Enfin, on se posait la question, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire exactement?
Quand on parle de soft skills en général, en tout cas chez nous dans les universités, c'est toutes ces compétences transversales. You choose a core curriculum, for example, law, chemistry, physics, arts, and you can add some other courses, for example, in languages or informatique ou différentes or academic writing and so on. So, vous avez plusieurs offres qui sont des offres qui sont transversales à l'université. On appelle ça soft skills. Hein. Et les langues sont dans cette catégorie-là. Et certains collègues aujourd'hui se demandent si les langues sont pas plus importantes. Les langues peut-être doivent être intégrées dans le core curriculum. Hein, et chaque faculté devrait dire, voilà l'importance que je donne aux langues, à certaines langues, au bilinguisme. Par exemple, in the Faculty of Law, hein, language is very important, bilingual is important, so you have to integrate this in the curriculum and to have specific credits for that. Hein. Et ça, c'est une question qui est pas facile, parce que certains disent, oui, les langues, ça s'ajoute, mais c'est invisible, c'est pas vraiment visible dans le degree, dans le diplôme, c'est quelque chose qui est parallèle. Et ça, c'est une grande discussion à la fois institutionnelle et fondamentale, théorique, sur la place de la langue.
On avait une question au fond.
In our area, I'm from the Middle States in the United States, Pennsylvania, and in our area, I'm not sure if this is true in other states of the U.S., but in our area, there's been a very dangerous decline of upper-level French courses, offering of them. At my university, starting next year, a student will not be able to major in French or any other language except Spanish. And the highest they can go is level 2, 200 level. I have a question for Hélène, but before I ask the question, another concern, of course, is people who want to become French teachers. Impossible, because they would not be able to pass the praxis. They wouldn't be able to have enough course content material to go out and teach French. Therefore, that trickles down into the high schools. The high schools can't offer French because there are no French teachers. So they go to another language, probably Spanish. My question, Hélène, is that have you noticed an influx, not influx, but an increase of U.S. students coming? I'm very impressed with your program, by the way. Have you noticed an increase of U.S. students? And again, I'm not sure this pertains to all over the U.S., but I know in my area, in the large universities, the French offerings have declined terribly. Have you noticed an increase of any U.S. students coming into your program? Because I, as a French teacher, would certainly recommend your program to my students who, they come to me, they say, I love French. We have an international program and language is not required. I mean, what is that? I mean, how do you have an international program where a language is not required? So
I'm going to let our director of the French immersion program answer that specific question.
No.
They probably don't know about it because it hasn't really. The students who want to major in, they'll come to me and say, I want to major in French, and then I go to the department head, and guess what? You can't major in French. Even the minors, she has to fight for those who want to minor in French.
We haven't seen, despite the fact that the university in general has seen a massive increase in the number of, or the amount of interest from U.S. students since November 9th. We haven't, in the last number of years, seen an increase in the number of American students coming here to study French. We've had a few, from Massachusetts, from Florida, from New York. The challenge indeed is to get the word out into the States. I've been to a couple of conferences, NECTFL, MAFL, ACTFL, and yeah, and the AATF, and we've had mailings to some high school teachers. The challenge in a lot of schools is that students in high school aren't at a very proficient level, generally speaking. Students who are doing perhaps the advanced placement or the international baccalaureates in high schools might have a level 4 out of 5 on AP. But from what I've seen in my visits to American schools, it might be 1 out of 100. And then as guidance counselors tell us, college or university selection process begins in grade 10. So by the time they hear about us in grade 11 or grade 12, their senior year, it's probably already too late. So there's a lot of work to be done to getting into the schools that have teachers that bring students to the advanced level. And also, the college recruitment process in the United States is a tough one. And they are aggressive and they are refined, and we're small potatoes compared to that.
We have an issue in the high schools, because I also taught in high school. I'm talking about college students. I also taught in high school, and we have an issue with counselors. I hope nobody here's a counselor, because it's always been a struggle to convince the counselors to tell the students, yes, they can take another language, and no, if you, yeah, of course everybody speaks English, but it would be nicer if you'd be able to go to a country and be able to communicate, or at least understand their culture, which is my big thing. Actually, I was thinking about transfer students when I asked you that question. Transfer students from the universities in areas where they cannot go further. And I would be more than happy to promulgate, to advertise your program at the university.
Lovely.
Even if that means losing, I mean, I love my students, but when they say to me, I want to go further, and I have some pretty good students. I mean, some of them are Francophones. They come from Algeria and Tunisia and Morocco. I have them, they're all coming in now, and it hurts me not to be, to say to them, we don't have courses for you.
I'd like to make a comment. In terms of the United States, the seal of biliteracy, I think your state has passed it. I'll talk about the seal of biliteracy tomorrow. 26 states have passed this law, legislation that gives a seal of biliteracy in students' diplomas, and students are now, it's becoming better known. So students are starting earlier because of the seal of biliteracy, understanding sort of the options to get that. And so I think this will help with recruitment at universities, and especially everybody wants to come to Canada now. So I think you should take advantage.
Sonia, I totally understand your program, because we have one similar to that, a bilingual bicultural program that deals with professionals who need to, we have police nurses who come in to learn Spanish. We also have a program where they do get a degree.
So I think, despite of November 9th, I think that there is an interest nationwide in the United States to come into the 21st century in terms of languages. Yes. So I'll share tomorrow.
En tout cas, je vous remercie d'abord les panélistes. Thank you very much. Merci pour les participations et les questions. Et je vous invite à monter au 12e étage pour le lunch qu'on prend ensemble.